When conviction turns to chaos and faith to fury.
Today on Context, what do we do when youth turn radical?
Stubbornness and rebellion. Not exactly new to the teenage title. But battles with isolation and alienation are taking on new forms of spirituality, producing extreme teenagers, united online as never before. Radical ads are bombarding young minds online, preying on the young and the vulnerable. Google recently announced that YouTube is so overloaded with terrorist propaganda that its expansive censoring division is incapable of keeping up. A recent poll conducted by Pollara Strategic Insights for CBC says 71% of Canadians feel youth in their communities and neighborhoods could turn to extremism. Today we'll look at how faith communities are fighting back to ensure faith is a reality that inspires love and not hate.
Well, today we tackle an issue that affects a demographic that both of us, Molly, fall into. Youth are being lured in online and becoming radicalized.
So today we're asking, could your child at home or even at your church, your synagogue or mosque be next? How do we keep youth plugged into a healthy spirituality? Well, we've lined up a panel of spiritual experts who want to get in on this conversation. 3 people, 3 faiths from 3 parts of the country.
That's right. Joining us from BC is Jeff Stewart, youth pastor and writer on the Alpha Youth film series, which has been used in more than 2,000 churches across Canada to teach young people about Christian faith. Joining us from Ottawa, Imam Mohammed Jabara is the resident scholar and chief imam at the Cordova Spiritual Education Center. And from Toronto, finally, Yaakov Fruchter, spiritual leader at the Jewish Center Annex Shul. Gentlemen, welcome to Context.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So let's start with this. And Yaakov, I'll turn to you first for this response. How do we keep youth plugged into a healthy spirituality?
I think the key to a healthy spirituality, first of all, is the idea of diversity or pluralism. Is that engaging them in something that goes beyond and having an understanding that goes beyond their own religion or their own way of practicing their said religion, but understanding that they're a part of something bigger. I also think it becomes a question of where it takes place and where that spirituality comes from. For the most part, in the Jewish community, the 3 places traditionally where spirituality was taught or where it was nurtured, of course, was the home, was the shul or synagogue, and finally was school or other formal education settings. Over time, though, Jewish camps became more and more important, a place where there's a lot of growth and leadership development opportunities for youth. And of course, now the internet is a great place to find really positive resources.
I want to know if I can get a response from Chief Imam. Imam, how do you weigh in on this?
Well, I'll have to agree with Yaakov as well, is that in diversifying the education of young people, we make them understand that there's a lot more in common among the people of the world, that we share so much, that there's so much universality in a lot of the basic tenets and basic ideas that people share. And I think that something that's also very important is maintaining a balance in faith, that if there's no balance, then that's where we have issues of extremism, that faith has to be founded upon a set of balance, that you can't go in one extreme or the other.
Gentlemen, there's a fascinating Maclean's article on how a belief in God, be that Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, or Vishnu, makes children more healthy and happy. I mean, but these radicalized youth that we are talking about, I mean, they already often have a strong faith. So what, in your opinion, I mean, is the most significant disconnect here? Imam Jabara, we'll start with you.
All right, and I think I would like to re-emphasize and reiterate that balance is key and moderation is key when it comes to the expression of faith. That if people, you know, there's a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in which he says that true faith has to be founded upon balance and upon moderation. Because when you overexert yourself in matters of faith, it becomes unbearable. So there has to be a balance in the way that we practice our faith, in the way that we integrate our faith into our daily lives. At the same time, we can't distance ourselves from the world or separate ourselves from the world, because the world is still where we dwell, and we have to make sure that we maintain a balance. And a healthy balance in the way that we express our faith, at the same time in the way that we interact with others. So faith can become part of the way that I live. So in the way that I interact with my friends, in the way that I socialize, can also be an expression of my faith. In my mannerism, in my behavior, in my etiquettes, that could also be an expression of faith. In sports expression, that could also be an expression of faith if we do it in a healthy and balanced, in a balanced manner that integrates faith in society as well.
Pastor Stewart, maybe I'll point that question to you as well. I mean, what is the disconnect in your opinion beyond that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think for a young person, one, seeking identity and seeking purpose in their life, but if there's not a multiple avenues for them to express their faith and live it out, they can lose contact or reality with how to actually implement it, and that idea of radicalism or those beliefs kind of going on a sidetrack or a way that's unhealthy. A lot of it comes down to the fact that they're not getting to live that faith out, or it's not happening in a faith community that's open. You know, I'm a part of a youth group where 70% of the students that are a part of my program come from families that aren't connected to the church, but our students are out in their high school living out their faith among their peers and actually being able to wrestle these truths out down to the ground and being held accountable for what they believe and being able to share it, and coming from families that don't necessarily believe. So I think there's healthy input, mentorship, and for a young person, just having adults challenge them on those things. They don't necessarily just take them at face value, but be willing to have conversations and dialogues in really healthy environments with great leaders and mentors.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
Thank you for having us on.
That was Jeff Stewart from the Alpha Youth Film Series, Imam Mohammed Jabera from the Cordova Spiritual Education Center, and Yaakov Fruchter from the Jewish Center Annex Shul right here in Toronto. Well, one man that admits to not having a healthy spirituality is Daniel Gallant, once a neo-Nazi white supremacist. He thrived off of injuring people for pleasure. Take a look.
I decided to show my dedication to the movement by committing an assault every day for a year. My fists, bar stool, beer glasses, beer bottles, beer pitchers, hockey stick, crutches, car door, throwing rocks, pellet guns, shovel, pitchfork. I've been so wounded that I've wanted to hurt other people in order to feel like I belonged.
Daniel Gallant no longer lives that lifestyle. Now, he founded the NGO Exit Canada, which works with former violent extremists, their families and communities to find a way out of radicalism. He's also completed his master's in social work and is currently a 2017 law candidate at Thompson Rivers University. He joins us from Kamloops, BC today. Daniel, I just want to start out by saying, wow, 180 turnaround of your life. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Daniel, I think everyone in this audience is probably wondering the same question here. I mean, how did you get into that lifestyle? What was the appeal that drew you in?
Well, it started by having a fairly tumultuous childhood, and ended up on the streets in Vancouver. At that time, I had already been actively violent and involved in the criminal lifestyle, and was introduced to individuals who then gave me an explanation as to who was to blame for the problems in my life and in society that I had seen and experienced. So it was easy for me to accept that there was someone particular to blame and target and have that as the ultimate target for the venting of my anger.
Daniel, we just spoke to, many different spiritual experts from different faith backgrounds about how to keep a healthy spirituality. For yourself, was this a type of spirituality being a part of that white supremacist group?
Well, the function of the group in relation to how spirituality or religion functions for people, as was said earlier, that spirituality can give a meaning and a purpose to a person's life. And it definitely, the movement that I was involved with did offer some context of meaning and purpose. However, that was very dysfunctional and misled, misguided.
Daniel, you work directly with young people that are in some troublesome spots. Is there hope for, I mean, violent extremists or radicalized youth? I mean, in an online world that's continuously grabbing at their attention, and I mean, YouTube can't even keep up with the terrorist propaganda they're saying that's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very troublesome. However, I believe that a lot of the solutions or ways to prevent these things are within that spectrum of prevention before people are radicalized, and offering narratives that exist and stories that exist of people who can perhaps steer someone away or have them consider engage critical thinking in relation to the narratives that they are hearing within the radicalization process. If caught early enough, there can be some tipping points in the radicalization process that may be able to deter people from becoming further radicalized. And as for people who are already radicalized, there is hope and potential for those individuals to be seeking out answers or questions that they may have that can lead to a form of disengagement or de-radicalization later on. So hope is never completely lost.
Mm-hmm. Daniel, there's many reasons why you left the white supremacist group. I mean, childhood flashbacks, your son being born was significant. I know you told me about 9/11, but your grandma, your Kokum, was a big driving force. Let's take a look at this story. I love this.
There were some guys that I had fought in the past. One guy who had stabbed me, and I got scared and I reached for my gun. What am I doing? Kokum came and grabbed my hands, just looked at me. And the way she looked at me, I've never felt so loved in my life. She had never done anything abusive with me, and is one of the few people that were like that in my life. The healing that has occurred in my life, I understood there what that meant.
Daniel, does that radical love still rock you?
Yeah. What you'll often hear from former extremists that I've been involved with in doing counter work is that the heart or the love or compassion with one another and that connection with each other will assist in preventing people from feeling the need to go down these paths in the cases where of the formers that I just mentioned, the former extremists. However, that's not to say that everything's preventable and through loving each other necessarily. However, that is definitely an ingredient that we all need to be focused on, is that connection with one another in society. And as was discussed earlier in the show, the differences in people need to be somewhat embraced rather than separating ourselves and creating divides based on differences.
Daniel, thank you so much for your thoughts today and for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Daniel Gallant is from Kamloops, BC. He is the founder of Exit Canada, an NGO which works with radicalized teens. You can learn more about his story at Extreme Dialogue. Coming up, he's been granted bail. Could Omar Khadr be in a classroom near you? Stay with us.
Go online for your chance to win. A new book for Lorna's books, God Answers Stage Left, is an excellent fit for this topic on going deeper on what does it really mean to follow and discover God. So, free copy of this book by Tim Day, God Answers Stage Left. All you have to do is go to our website, enter the draw, contactswithlorna.com, click on Lorna's books for your chance to win. Good luck.
This segment is brought to you by Bruce Etherington and Associates, Family Harmony and Philanthropy, helping you help others.
Now, former Guantanamo Bay prisoner Omar Khadr has been granted bail by an Alberta judge. His bail conditions have been set out. Now, faculty from the King's University, a Christian school in Edmonton, who have been working with Khadr for 6 years, say they will proudly welcome him as a student if Khadr wishes so. We will speak with the president of the King's University in a moment. But before we do, some background on the case of Omar Khadr. As part of a plea deal in 2002, Toronto-born Omar Khadr pleaded guilty to 5 charges, including murder and supporting terrorism, charges in connection with the killing of a U.S. soldier at an al-Qaeda compound. Omar Khadr was 15 at the time of the killing. Khadr's lawyers argue he was a child soldier and should be looked at as a victim. Khadr withdrew his guilty plea, but later answered yes to killing an American soldier before a military judge. Now, Khadr was sentenced to 40 years in prison, which was later reduced to 8 years, which he served in Guantanamo and Alberta. Khadr, now 28, has reneged on his earlier confession, saying he was unfairly prosecuted. This April, Omar Khadr was granted bail, and the federal government is appealing this decision. Dr. Mellie Humphries is the president of the King's University. She joins me from Edmonton. Dr. Humphries, welcome to Context.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's start here. Your school, the King's University, has been working with Omar Khadr for 6 years. How did your relationship with him start and develop?
That's a good question. Actually, it was a little over 6 years ago when one of his lawyers came and presented at a conference that we held about invisible dignity. And so we were looking at people who were marginalized or perhaps overlooked. And this conference presentation really lit up our students. They heard an interesting story about Canadian human rights, in particular a specific case. And so they were encouraged to research not just opinions, but to really look down and get into researching what this story was and what the implications were for all Canadians. And so our faculty worked alongside students to support them, and it became a process in which communication started to happen between Omar Khadr and King's. And at one point in that conversation, the U.S. military invited King's to assist with some of his education while he was still in Guantanamo.
The King's University, the mission statement says, we exist to provide university education that inspires and equips learners to bring renewal and reconciliation to every walk of life as followers of Jesus Christ. It's an interesting mission statement there, but does framing your work with Omar Khadr as a mission decision risk going beyond perhaps the prescribed borders of what a university should be about?
Good question. There's an old saying that says, "What you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying." And so we really believe that institutions teach. Students cannot be missional about their convictions unless they're actually seeing it modeled by the university that they are attending. So we feel there is no value-neutral education. How do we walk alongside students and help them be missional in their convictions?
I was looking up some things about what you said in the media about this decision, and you said it's because the King's University is a Christian school that you are involved in the life of Omar Khadr, and that being a Christian school is not about, exclusively being involved in Christian affairs only, but seeing ways you can kind of reach across the aisle, as it were. But what does a Christian faith environment of learning offer Omar Khadr that, might be unique compared to others?
Mm-hmm. Christian higher education, and particularly the education that happened at King's, looks at connecting students with their passion about making a difference in the world. And I'm not quite sure what Christian affairs, quote unquote, is exactly, because an education at King's really prepares students to engage across all professions. It really prepares them to be an active citizen in whatever role they may find themselves in.
I'm not quite sure how intimately you've been involved with Omar Khadr, but after everything he's gone through and experienced over the years, since his capture, is he angry?
I think we have continued to follow our educational mandate. We have definitely been engaged. Our volunteer faculty have been involved in teaching him, getting him up to high school equivalency. He's a remarkable person in terms of his understanding and engagement with the issues. He's stayed away from conflicts, been model prisoner, involved in all kinds of activities and interfaith activities. So
even to give a framework of what I mean by intimately, just in some of the word choices you've said, you know, he's a remarkable individual. I'm wondering, besides through the lens of just an education working alongside of him through that way, has there been any other relationships built that say, you know what, he's, you know, relational? Is there anything beyond that that has pointed to that?
I think everything we do is within a Christian and educational context, and so as educators, we see him interacting with people around him. We see him engaged with activities and actively participating. So he's been a very thoughtful person to speak with. He does not strike me as angry.
You know, what are some of the pushback you've received as a result of the decision to open your doors to a convicted terrorist?
You know, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. The Canadian Corrections Services really talks about how do we rehabilitate individuals, and that is through community, that's through connections. It's not dropping them off without any kind of supports. And so I think Canadian society understands that. There have been some concerns about safety, and we've been addressing those. A lot of those concerns have been for safety for Omar himself. Students have brought up, you know, how does he transition to having a regular, normal life, and how do we support him in doing that?
What do you believe to be, I'm curious, the heart of God as it concerns Omar Khadr's reintegration into society?
Yeah, that's also an interesting question. You know, I really would see the heart of God being something that I would hope that people of faith could model and teach a way of engaging with the world that listens, that contributes, that is building a better society and a better world.
Dr. Mellie Humphries, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That was Dr. Mellie Humphries, president of the King's University. She joined us from Edmonton. Well, now we turn to you, our audience, to find out what you think. And our first guest here, my question to you is, you know, coming out of that interview, what do you think of the King's University's decision to open its doors to a convicted terrorist?
I think actually in Canadian society there's an important place for former violent extremists, former terrorists. As Daniel Gallant, we saw, he's leading the Canadian efforts in counter-radicalization, at least outside of the government. And they can actually provide a credible voice to people who might not take government voices as credibly. They've experienced the movement, the ideology, the radicalization, and they can, after having, you know, rejoined society, a positive society, they can actually say, here's why the things that you want to do or that I formerly did are wrong, and here's how you can better channel your ideology or your feelings and your emotions and all that. So I think they're actually a crucial part of society if they can come back into it positively.
That integration is essential.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the student sitting beside you from Catch the Fire School, I believe. You know, but as a student, I mean, if you were in the classroom with a convicted terrorist, how would you honestly feel?
I think I would feel kind of scared, but I think it's good to kind of face your fears and honestly giving people a second chance, because we're taught in church that we are to give people a second chance through grace, and that through the whole Bible, people are giving more than one chance to actually change their behavior, change the way they think and how they want to spend their life. And I think that we need to act on it and actually forcing ourselves to face this fear of giving them a second chance, even though it's hard to do it.
A lot to consider. Thank you all for sharing that insight. Coming up, some closing thoughts on keeping youth plugged into a healthy spirituality.
I'm Rose Meter. I'm a mom, a wife, and an ER doctor in rural Canada. This year, my husband Rob and I have decided to take our 4 kids on a trip around the world. We have no idea what lies ahead. I'll be updating our journey on the Context with Lorna Duick website with blog posts and videos about our triumphs and trials and adventures. Won't you join us?
Here at Context, we love to hear from you, our viewers at home. Recently, David wrote, "Your show is ridiculous. Hopefully no tax dollars are funding this garbage." Well, David, you'll be happy to know that our show is entirely funded by our viewers, and we'd like to take this opportunity to say how much we appreciate your donations to help us share Christian stories. Thank you for helping us make television we can all be proud of. Well, everyone except for David. Missed an episode? Catch up with our podcasts. Get up to date on the latest conversations from beyond the headlines. Simply go to our website, click on our link to find current and past podcasts on iTunes. It's free, don't delay.
Well, we've discovered today that healthy spirituality is a multi-layered effort from the home, place of worship, and community that must be kept in check. But perhaps beyond this is the need to move from a perspective of us and them to a principle of we. You know, I'm reminded of the story of the Good Samaritan, a man in pain and desperate need of help who laid on the street as people just simply passed him by. But all that changed when one person looked beyond this individual's seemingly extreme past, religious stripe, and socioeconomic level and saw that, you know, someone was simply in need of help.
In Canada, who do we need to help? I mean, we pride ourselves on being multicultural, a place for accommodation, not assimilation, and yet young people still feel isolated and alienated. We as faith communities need to respond to this, recognizing disenfranchisement, but also forgiving mistakes. Remember, it was a grandmother's unconditional love that changed the life of a white supremacist. It's the compassion of a university that's opening its doors to a convicted terrorist. Radicalization can only be defeated by radical actions of love, and perhaps we as faith communities need to start that national conversation.
For all of us here at Context, I'm Sheldon Neal.
And I'm Molly Thomas.
Join us next week as we explore life beyond the headlines.